Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Venael Kids Ministry. I want to welcome you. We're going to be talking about the first 5 books of the Bible. First, let's open up with a moment in prayer. Thank you, Lord, for everything you've given us, the good and the bad, because you promised you would be with us through the bad as well as the good. And everything, help us to understand your will and your way, so that way we may do it and walk in your paths. In your name we pray. Jesus of Nazareth. Amen. Okay, guys, thanks for tuning in. The first thing we're going to be talking about is Genesis. Well, what does Genesis and the books of the law have to do with each other? Well, the first 5 books of the Bible are known as the books of the law, but they're also known as the Torah and or the Pentateuch. Penta being 5 and Tuch being book. Okay, so these are the books of the law, okay? Now let's break it down. We have Genesis here. We have key characters and stories. But let's see, who wrote the book of Genesis? Because that's pretty important. Well, we know that Moses is credited with writing the book of Genesis. And in fact, Moses is the one credited writing all the books of the law, which are Genesis, which we're talking about, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Big words, I know, but they're very important. They all mean a thing, okay? They all mean things. Okay, so now, Genesis is a quick overview, okay? Genesis is the book of beginnings, okay? This is the beginnings of man, beginning of the world, okay? It's called creation. Okay, so the book of Genesis is broken down into, first it's God and humanity, okay? And then God's promises to Abraham, very key character here, all right? And then it's going to be with God and Israel, okay? Now, we know Moses wrote, the book of Genesis. So throughout history, it's been transcribed, okay? The scribes who copied it over and over and over have been doing that for a long time. And it's known as the Tanakh. Well, what's the purpose of Genesis, okay? Well, it's setting the stage for the rest of the books, okay? It has everything to do with the human affairs and God. It defines the purpose and nature of the Bible. And it tells Israel's origin, the nation. It tells their beginnings. And it gives hope for everybody in the world. It's a very, if you don't understand this book, you will be confusing for the rest of the Bible. So take some time to read this to understand what it's trying to say, okay? All right. We talked about creation. God created everything, all right? Nothing that was made, did God not have anything to do with it. God made everything. Think about it, everything, even you, all right? You had a beginning. God does not have a beginning, okay? Adam and Eve had a beginning, the first humans, okay? There's a lot, you're going to hear a lot about this throughout your life, but the Bible declares the beginnings of humans are Adam and Eve, okay? Now, Adam and Eve were pure and they were good, okay? Nothing wrong with them. They were innocent, all right? Well, the book of Genesis is describing what happened. Adam and Eve sinned. They rebelled, against what God told them to do. So, when they did that, knowing that they were breaking God's law or word or trust, the consequences were that they were going to die. Okay? Well, now God finds out that they were going to die. He gives a curse. Excuse me. And the curse is on man, woman, and Satan. All right. There's a lot of characters here, but they fell. Now, through the curse, God still had a plan, because he's perfect and righteous and wisdom and everything, to redeem man to himself. Okay? That's the key. He's redeeming him for God. Okay? That's us. He wants us to be close to him. That's the point. All right? Because we went away from him. This is why we get lost. Okay? When we find our Father, God Almighty, we become whole again, because that's why we were created. All right, so I'm putting that into there because that's very, very, very important. Okay. Well, the key characters now in the book of Genesis is going to be Cain. Now, Cain was the son of Adam and Eve. They also had Abel. Well, Cain got jealous of his brother's gifts to God, and he slew him. So Cain killed his brother, which is the first murder, first taking of human life. All right? So when he did that, now he did not realize what he was doing, and therefore he was cursed. Okay? Human evil entered into humanity, which is all humans, all right? Everybody is dealing with these issues, which is evil in ourselves. It got so bad that everybody started to do that, and therefore God did not see anybody that was doing good in their actions or in their mind or in their thoughts. God was disappointed. It grieved him, okay, that he did not see any kind of righteousness in humans on his earth, on paradise that he made for them. So he chose a certain man named Noah. He told him to build a boat because he told them there's a great flood coming, all right? And when that flood came, everybody died but Noah and his family, okay? There were only 8 of them, all right? They went through a lot, all right? Now, after the flood, the waters receded, which means they just dried up a little bit, or just land appeared. A rainbow was presented as a promise to all of humanity, all of us, that God will not destroy the earth with water again for the sake of man. Because the whole earth suffered because of the actions of man. And God destroyed it because of man. And his promise is, I won't do it again. And if you want to see that, just look after a rainstorm, usually around 5 o'clock in the afternoon I think or in the morning around 8 o'clock. It has to be at a certain angle. You'll see a rainbow. It has nothing to do with LGBTQ, QRS, TUV, W, X, Y, and Z. It has everything to do with God's promise, okay, that he will not destroy the earth, okay? God keeps his promises. All right. Now, after Noah and the flood, salvation comes to Noah, and then now the nations, God told them to be fruitful and multiply again. This made everybody come together, and certain cities Everybody liked being with each other. All right? And so they began the nation. It was one at the moment, and it had a tower everybody wanted to build so they can be proud of. And God did not like that. All right? He wanted everybody to go their way and make their own home, but everybody came together. And they built a big tower. Well, God did not like that because in their hearts they were proud. All right? And so he confused their language. All right? He made it to where they did not understand each other. All right. And then that began the different nations of the world. And this is where the Bible says the origin of the nations come from. All right? Now, the second part of Genesis is going to be God's promises to Abraham, because out of those nations, there was a certain man God chose for him to be called out of that nation, which a man named Abram, all right? Abram did not have a son. So God told him, I'm calling you out, and I will give you a son. Well, in his old age, it's very hard to believe, but he did have a son. And Abraham's son, Isaac, had another son named Jacob. And you're going to be hearing this a lot throughout the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, it's very common. They are very, very important. They are called the patriarchs, okay? And a lot happens with them, and God is revealing his character through their experiences, okay? And what he's trying to tell them comes through those stories. You've got to read it. You've got to read Genesis. All right, don't give up. It's in there. And Jacob had a son named Joseph, all right? Now, Joseph had many brothers. And his brothers were jealous of Joseph, okay? And so they did not like it. His brothers got jealous. So when they're jealous, you do things you don't really understand. You just want them to go away, okay? And when they basically told him, go away, and they sold him into slavery, well, they gave him to sell other people, never to come home again, all right? And that's those brothers. They ended up having a hard time during a real long drought. We all know in Texas what a drought is. And there's no rain. We need water. Water is very important to everybody. And sometimes we take it for granted, but we need to understand water is important. And when there's a drought, our food tend to go really scarce, okay? All right, so now, they had a drought and they needed food. They needed to go to Egypt. Well, that was exactly the same place that Joseph had ended up. He was there, and God was with him to rise in power and righteousness, and therefore was able to help his brothers survive as well as their father Jacob. All right. So now, there's a lot to these stories, okay? But you're getting the important parts of this, is that God is revealing himself through these stories and experiences that he's putting his people through, or his Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay. Now, Genesis is talking about the beginnings of genealogies, okay? Where do we come from, and how it explains everything in the beginning, okay? It's Genesis. When you think of Genesis, think of beginnings. That's going to be the easiest way to remember, all right? All right, moving on. Now in Exodus. What do you think of when you think of the word Exodus? Well, exit is probably going to be the best way to remember where they're exiting from. We just went over that they were in Egypt because Jacob and his sons needed help, and Joseph helped them when they were in Egypt. All right. Well, time passes, Exodus is basically how Egypt became the oppressor of the people of Israel. Because the people of Israel were not Egyptians in so much as what they worship. They still had their God. But Egypt was fearful. The king of Egypt, which is Pharaoh, was afraid of the number of Israelites that were in Egypt. So he decided to get mean with them, okay? So he decided to get mean, and God decides to take action. God chooses Moses. Now, Moses is very important, extremely important. We know this already, right? Moses is God's chosen deliverer for his people, all right? So much happens with Moses. When he was a baby, Pharaoh tried to kill him, okay? His sister Miriam helped him escape. Pharaoh was like a brother to him because Moses was raised in Egypt as well as like a prince. Aaron, his actual brother, and Joshua, which is later on. These are key characters of the book of Exodus, okay? Now, Exodus, there are three parts to Moses' life. He, at first, was raised in Egypt for about 40 years, okay? 40 years, all right? And then he leaves Egypt for the next 40 years. God's training him, okay? He was in luxury for 40 years growing up, and then now he's in the desert for 40 years, all right? And then God tells him to go deliver my people from the hands of Egypt, all right? He's about 80 years old, but he does. And then Pharaoh decides to say, no, I'm not going to let your people go, excuse me. And so God is trying to tell them, yes, you're going to let my people go, or you're going to suffer some plagues. All right, what is a plague? Well, it's when bad things happen around your environment. All right, bad things happen. Each time Pharaoh says no, God sends a plague. All right? Okay, so those are the 10 plagues that God, through Moses, is telling Pharaoh, I am God, not you, not Pharaoh. Okay? So that goes on. There's a lot to that, all right? We're going to simply overviewing everything. All right, so now, the 10 plagues. Once the 10 plagues are done, the Passover, on the final plague, Pharaoh says to every Israelite firstborn is going to be killed, no matter their age. They're going to be killed. God turns that around and says, no, that's not going to happen. In fact, you just cursed your own people. And your firstborns are going to die. Very important to be a firstborn son. And how did the Israelites protect themselves from the firstborn, being killed by this angel that God sends? Well, God tells them to put a lamb's blood on their doorposts, okay? Very significant. When the angel saw the blood on front of the doorposts, he knew to pass over that house, which is why we call it the Passover, okay? So that's very important because it has many, many parallels to what's coming later in the Bible. So we call that the Passover, all right? After that, Pharaoh gives up. He tells them, go, take your people, take your goats, take everything, just get out of here. They ended up leaving, all right? The Israelites were leaving Egypt. And now they're at the Red Sea, just very, very south of the capital of Egypt. I believe it's Cairo. Hopefully I got that right. Now they're stuck because Pharaoh changes his mind, and now he wants to chase them and kill them now. All of them. He doesn't care. He's mad. And now the children of Israel are afraid because they can't run anymore. There's the sea one way, and then you got the chariots of Egypt behind them. They don't know where to go. God says to Moses, lift your hands up, and Moses does, and Moses, through God, actually God through Moses, splits the sea. He divides the sea so they can walk on dry land. That's amazing. Nothing like that's ever happened. And nothing like that I don't think will happen. It's amazing. Not like that. God doesn't do that. I mean, like twice. It's just amazing. Now, the whole nation was walking through on foot. Okay? When the Egyptians decided to also run on dry land on the Red Sea, and all the Israelites were finished walking across, the sea caved in on those soldiers, killing them. Okay? This really happened. This is for real. It happened. And it's recorded for us here in the Bible. It's the book of Exodus. Okay? Now the children of Israel have seen what God can do. Moses takes them to a mountain. It's called Mount Sinai. All right? Well, God tells them to wait while Moses goes up on the mountain. Well, Moses takes a while, and the people, they just don't want to wait anymore. They want to do what they want to do. You can take the Israelites out of Egypt, but it's kind of hard to take Egypt out of the Israelites. That's really true there. So what they did, they end up making a statue and worshiping that statue because that's what they saw in Egypt. And then when Moses comes down, he was upset. God told Moses to come down because God saw what was happening down at the bottom of the mountain. And so the 10 Commandments given to Moses by the finger of God, these tablets that had God's law on it, these rules, okay? Israel breaks them. Moses throws the tablets down into the bottom of the mountain and breaks the law, and he tells them who's on God's side and who's not. All right? So the tablets were broken. This is a lot of stuff. I'm sorry, but this is amazing. And it's really thick and rich. All these stories are rich. If you read them over and over again, you're going to get something new. I promise you, it happens to everybody. This book is alive. So, Moses throws the tablets down, and he breaks, right? But the people worshiping the golden calf, they're given a second chance. So God is telling Israel to build a tabernacle, okay? Which is a tabernacle, which is it's a box, okay, with the tablets in them, all right? It's a portable way for God to be with his people, all right? No more going to the mountain. God's like, I'm going to be with you, okay? I'm going to be with you because you're taking this box, all right? The portable temple where God can dwell with Israel. All right, we're almost done with Exodus. All right, so Israel builds a tabernacle and God fills it, okay? But not even Moses can enter it, this holy place. It's called the Holy of Holies. It's very holy, all right? So remember that. Exodus is how the people of Israel exited Egypt and they became a nation. That's what Exodus is about, okay? Next. Leviticus. Okay. Leviticus is for the Levites, the tribe of Levites, okay? The tribe of Levi. This is where God says, be holy because I'm holy. Follow these parameters, follow these rules, follow these actions so you can be pure like me, all right? And I will accept them, all right? It's Israel's purity code for coexisting, which is existing with their God, all right? Very important. That's what this book is about. Leviticus is about being pure, all right? There are instructions for God's people and the Ten Commandments. All right, so Exodus gave us Israel, Mount Sinai, and God, right? Now it's going to be Israel with God, like we said in the tabernacle. So God is basically moving in with his people, all right? Moses makes the tent and the tabernacle, and he makes them for God, all right? So before the book of Leviticus, Israel breaks God's laws, and Moses can't enter the tabernacle, right? After Leviticus, Israel has more laws. Moses can now enter the tabernacle, and the priests from the tribe of Levi can maintain their purity. That's what it's about. It's about them being able to be acceptable to God with these rules. Follow them to the T. Don't try to cut corners, all right? God says it, you do it. Don't play around, all right? This is very, very specific, all right? All right. So, let me see if I find myself here real quick. Leviticus. All right, Leviticus. Because a lot of people don't know too much of Leviticus. So, God's name in Hebrew is, there's 4 consonants, Y-W-H-W, but what we now can pronounce as Yahweh, okay? That's Hebrew, okay? Very, very sacred. And in fact, it was so sacred that most of the Israelites forgot his name because they wouldn't say it. They forgot how to say God's name because it was so sacred to them. We should never forget, okay? Yahweh. So, the whole book is about how the nation of Israel needs to live in order to survive, living in the presence of such a powerful, holy being. Okay? So the key themes. Let's go with the key themes here. Holy means set apart. Excuse me. Set apart. But it's a lot more involved than just being special. Okay? God is holy, far greater in love, goodness, power, and justice than humans. All right? Far, far greater. Gives you an idea how far away we've strayed away from him. That's what sin does. Until this point in the Bible, God has been a long way off from the people of earth, although God has communicated with humans and in some cases even appeared to them privately, like Abraham had been privately visited by the angel of the Lord. That's in Genesis, by the way. He has yet to publicly manifest his presence or make appear his presence on earth since the Garden of Eden, which is in the beginnings of Genesis. God has not made that kind of appearance yet. But all this changed. God has made Israel his people. His people so that the world can see God through his people. Okay? That's why. That's why he chose them. And because of Abraham's faith, that's why he chose them. A people that now represent God on earth. He has now established his presence in the tabernacle. We talked about that. That's the box where the tablets are in. A portable holy place where God can dwell in the midst of the nation. But if people are going to live in the presence of God, some things will need to change. Because God is so holy, set apart, that people associated with him must become set apart too. All right? All right. The closer a a human being gets to God, the more ritualistically pure they have to be if they want to survive. So 100% holy, well, that's God. Well, then you got the tabernacle, and then you got the priests, then you got Israel, and then you got unclean everybody else. All right? Do you see that there's a degradation there? One way that the ancients understood holiness was in the terms of whether something was clean or unclean. That's what this book is about, clean or unclean. This isn't the same as good or bad. It's a sense of purity. It's something aligned with the God we are approaching. Or is it unaligned? All right, so now, that's what we're talking about. Trying to be pure in front of God, in the presence of God, in God's sight. That's what these rules are for, okay? So, the core theme of the book, when someone's operating in alignment with God's purity laws, is that they are clean. When someone is out of bounds, they are unclean. The book of Leviticus has a lot to say about these two things. An important thing to note throughout the Pentateuch is that Moses assumes that everyone will be unclean at some point. After all, everybody is unclean at some point. I mean, that's in Deuteronomy. The point is to live in a manner that respects the presence of God. Okay. So, we now know that the book of Leviticus is for the instructions of the people of Israel to be pure through rules, okay, that God sets through Moses, okay, the rules. And the Israelites obeyed these rules so they can be in the presence of God. All right, and the presence of God was the tabernacle at that time, which we said was a box with the holy tablets of the 10 Commandments that are in them. Okay? Just a recap. All right. Leviticus is very important. Yahweh is publicly living with the humans. All right? Not a lot of story happens. Leviticus, the people stay camped out on Mount Sinai throughout the book. So the book, that's where they are, Mount Sinai, which is, you can look it up. Google it. I think I remember where it's at. It's really south of Egypt, Saudi Arabia. The people stay camped out. It's not until the book of Numbers that they resume their journey to the Promised Land. Okay, that's the next book that they leave, all right? So now that's pretty much it. Okay, so now we know Moses and Aaron, which is Moses' brother, they are very key components in the instructions for the people to live in the presence of God, all right? That's what the book of Leviticus is about. You go to Leviticus to find the purity laws, the purity rules, okay? Put that to mind. Think about that. When you think about the Old Testament purity laws, you're going to Leviticus. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Okay. I'm driving that home because usually it's easy to forget. That's why I'm repeating myself. All right. Next, from Leviticus to Numbers. Okay, so Numbers. Now, Numbers, I'm going to find myself here real quick. Numbers is exactly what it is. It's the number of Israelites. It's a census. It's what they call taking a census of the people. So how many Israelites are there? Well, they took a census. And that's what the numbers come from, okay? Now, in the book of Numbers, it describes a few stories as well, okay? The key themes are about human rebellion, okay? The Israelites rebel against God, all right? Let's talk about the key characters, okay? First of all, let me go back to that. The key characters of the book of Numbers are going to be Moses, Aaron, Miriam, which is the sister of Moses, Joshua, which is Moses' successor, Caleb, which is also a good friend of Joshua, and Balaam, okay, which is a Gentile. Well, what's a Gentile? Someone that's not an Israelite, okay? So now, if I got that right, I hope I corrected myself. The book of Numbers is talking about how the Israelites rebelled against God. They're not doing right with the laws. They're not doing right with what God said. They're not doing right, okay? They're rebelling because they want to do what they want to do. We all know that, correct? We all do what we want to do. We all get told that it's not always the best doing what we want to do. Hence, this book is really good for us to read. The Israelites rebelled against God, and Moses several times in the book of Numbers, he heard them complain about food. They complained about water. They complained that they be crushed by their enemies. They complained about Moses. You get the idea here? They're complaining. Do y'all complain at home? I'm pretty sure you do. And that's just not for kids as well. That's everybody complains at some time. It's not good to complain, all right? It takes away from what we should be appreciative for. We should all be grateful for the things we have, but our hearts get in the way that we don't have what we want, and then we complain. It doesn't help anybody. Complaining doesn't help. I know we all do it, okay? I get that. All right, but the people of Israel were complaining, all right, about everything, so don't feel alone. So when the people complain, God hears them, and it doesn't go well. The book of Numbers has stories of God killing rebellious Israelites with fire, with plagues, and snakes. Why do they have to be snakes? Sometimes Moses calls to God for help. When the people turn on Moses, they turned on him. And sometimes God punishes them directly. So there's a divine provision, okay? But even through the people, but even though the people prove to be rebellious, God extends mercy to them. This is how good God is. When punishment is coming or afterwards, God is trying to say, please come back to me. Come back to my ways. Remember me and understand that I'm your God. Through the punishment, okay? That means there's a choice. There's a voice calling in our minds saying, don't do wrong. Stop it. Do right. Be holy like me. I promise you won't be punished. But if you are going through hard times, I'm going to be with you. All right? So this is how good God is. His character is being revealed through these books of the law. That's what they're called, okay? Okay, rather than killing off the whole nation in the wilderness because he made them to wander in the wilderness, he could have given them to the land of Canaan really fast, but he decided to make them wander in the wilderness for many, many, many years. Instead of killing the whole nation, he waits for the rebellious generation, which is the people that were adults at that time, to die and keep the younger people alive. All right? He continues to provide manna, which is like food. It's food falling from the sky, not H-E-B, okay? It's God provided food for his people from the sky every morning. Every morning, okay? It's amazing how he took care of his people through hard times. He even presents Balaam, the pagan prophet, he's not an Israelite, he's a prophet, from cursing the people, okay? Now, that's an interesting story. Remember the name Balaam. We'll get into that later, all right? All right. More laws, okay? This is still the Torah, remember? Pentateuch, right? The books of the law. After all, the book of Numbers is a string of episodes from Israel's journey. And the author, Moses, punctuates, which emphasizes or makes known more than others, many of the episodes with a new set of laws given to the people. Numbers doesn't have to be big, bulky sets of laws we see in the other latter half, which is the second half of Exodus and Leviticus and almost all of Deuteronomy. But there's still plenty of rules here, okay? That's Numbers. There's a lot that's happening. And the census of the people that they took in the beginning of the book. So Moses' leadership, because he's leading his people, right? He deals with a lot of pressure. It takes a lot to be a leader. You've got a lot of people telling you what to do. And you don't want to do things wrong. That's called pressure. Pressure to do right. Moses feels like he's unappreciated. And he's forced to carry 600,000 complaining people across the desert. That's a lot to deal with. Moses tells God early in the book, I can't do this. I can't carry all these people by myself. The burden's too heavy for me. If this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and just kill me. Well, time and again, God makes it clear to the people that Moses is his chosen prophet. Moses is his chosen prophet. However, due to an episode of Moses' disobedience, he is not permitted to enter Canaan, which is the land of milk and honey. Okay, so Canaan, this is the land that God promised the people of Israel that he wanted them to be. But there are so many lessons God is trying to teach his people because, remember, there's too much complaining. There's too much of Egypt inside the people of Israel. In their hearts, God's looking for someone, for his nation to turn to him and really rely on him. How do you know if his people really rely on God? Through tests and trials. And then God can be revealed. In their weakness, God's strength can be revealed. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. But going through these tests and trials, our hearts get in the way and we want to know everything and figure everything out, and we want to be in control of everything, and we want to have our dreams fulfilled. But God's like, I'm trying to teach you something, that don't rely on yourself too much, and in fact rely on me and I will not let you down. That's what God's trying to tell them. That's hard to do. That's not easy. Okay? So the book of Numbers, actually the book of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, they're all trying to say that. Okay? Before I get ahead of myself, let me go past Numbers now. Okay? So we talked about the journey to the promised land. We talked about Israel's struggle with a lack of faith, which is the complaining part. We talk about the water from a rock. Okay, there's a water that the people were thirsty, and God told Moses to strike he did not tell him to strike, if I get that right, a rock where water would flow, but he did it out of frustration of dealing with the Israelites, his own people, and God did not like that. Okay? He struck it out of anger. He was angry because everybody was complaining. So Moses let his emotions get the best of him, and he struck the rock twice. And God said, you're not going to enter the land of milk and honey. I'm not going to let you, because you did not do what I asked you to do. Okay, so now, we talked about the water from the rock, Balaam's talking donkey. Oh, that's an amazing story. So, if I get into a little bit of Balaam and Balak, okay? Balaam, the enemies of Israel wanted a prophet to curse the people of Israel. He wanted that to happen. So these enemies, their king went to a pagan prophet, which is not Israel. It's another culture. They told him, what will it take for you to curse the people of Israel? And he said, I will not do it. Well, this enemies of Israel said, would you do it for gold and silver and treasures and donkeys and all that? he said, let me go ask God. I'll go ask. And God said, no. And then he comes back to those kings and says, God says no, so I say no. And they said, what about if I give you some more money? Some more gold? Balaam says, let me go ask. And God says, no. So Balaam returns and says, God says no, I say no. And so they offer him even more treasure. And God says, look, I told you no. All right? And so he comes back to the kings and says, God says no. But the people of Israel say, the enemies of Israel say, if you can't curse them, can you corrupt them? If I got that right. That's really what's coming down to the Balaam story. If you can't curse the people of Israel, can you corrupt them for us, please? And they sent them women that did not do good, okay? Did not keep their hearts pure, like Leviticus asked them to. So that's the story of Balaam. And then God tries to stop Balaam from cursing the people with a talking donkey. And we'll get into that story later. I don't want to speak too much on that one without doing some more preparation for that. But that's an interesting story. And those are the main characters of Numbers, okay? Numbers. Now, going on to the next book, the last one. Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is a long word, all right? Do, which is to, and onomy, which is law. This is the second law, the second giving of the law. And Moses is giving the same law again, okay? Now, the Ten Commandments come back again. And the promised land, he's trying to tell his people to love the Lord your God. And here are the laws for God's people. Okay, and then Moses passes away. All right. There's a lot to Deuteronomy, all right? So, let me get my Deuteronomy out of here. Here we go. So I can give you some more explanation. Okay. And here we go. Introduction. Okay, you're recapping the miracles, which is the plagues of Egypt from Exodus. And then God spoke, right, on the mountain. Israel broke the laws. We got that, right? And let's see if I get this right. Moses gives Israel a choice, life or death, right? Blessings from God or consequences for disloyalty. All right? So now, the laws for life in Canaan, in the land of milk and honey, God gives them the laws. Moses, he assembles, okay, we're looking at that. He assembles Israel before he dies, and they enter Canaan. So, okay, put that into perspective. Moses gathers his people right before they're going to enter into the land of Canaan. Okay? And he gives them a second giving of the law that he gave them in the first. And the laws, some of the laws are repeated and some are very unique, okay? Love God, one place, and no idols, okay? Why do you give them that? Because the other people were doing the complete opposite of that. Obey God, which is revere him, be justice, and have generosity. That's obeying God, all right? That's the law. Love God and obey God. Those are two things in Deuteronomy. Love God and obey God. That's what Deuteronomy is trying to explain. Okay? Given Israel's history, they recommit themselves to God. We're going to give ourselves again to the Lord, all right? And ensure a good future in the land God gives you. All right? So now, when you get there, the land of milk and honey, Canaan, assembled two mountains, which is Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. Okay, those two mountains are actually in existence, okay? So one mountain is blessings and the other mountain is curses, all right? This is Deuteronomy. Israel will once again hear God's laws from the mountains and will need to choose to love and obey their God. It's simple, right? It's nothing complicated. It's it's not far-fetched or too far for you to understand that God is trying to say, love me and obey me. That's it. That's all. As simple as it is, it's not easy, but it's simple. It's not hard to understand, okay? It's very difficult because, again, our hearts get in the way. So, Moses predicts the future. You will be disloyal, and you will be kicked out of the land, okay? Moses is saying this about the people before they're entering in the land. He's telling them what's going to happen way down in the future. But he also says God will restore you and give new hearts that truly love and obey God. Okay, so remember, God is so good that he's actually just and right and loving even through punishment. That's the best right there. He's trying to give us the lessons to come back to him, all right? God is not cruel. And you can be restored. You can do this if you choose life, okay? Choose life. Now, the Torah, remember, is the first 5 books. It closes right with Joshua, which is naming Moses' successor. Joshua is going to take the leadership role that Moses had for so long, okay? Moses, the Torah is written, right, at this point. All the books is what we assume. Moses' song, he has a warning for Israel and consequences. So Moses has a song of warning in the book of Deuteronomy, okay, for his people. It's a song of Moses. And Moses' blessing for each tribe's future prosperity, okay? Now, after this, Moses dies, okay? And the books of the law are complete. There's no more. That's it, all right? The books of the law are now. We've covered a lot of information in a short period of time, and hopefully I've done a good presentation of doing that, my best. But really, I'm trying to simplify everything for you. Genesis is the book of beginnings. Exodus is the book of exiting Egypt, and Israel becomes a nation. All right? Leviticus is the book of rules and purity for the people to live with God. All right? The book of Numbers is a census that they took at the beginning of the book of how many Israelites are there, okay? And their tribes, there's 12 tribes, because there are 12 sons of Jacob. And the book of Numbers goes into the lack of faith and the rebellion of the people of Israel and how they went, okay? Numbers is the census, and Deuteronomy is the second giving of the law. All right? And that's where Moses gathers his people before entering the land of milk and honey, where they waited so long for, and tells them to love God and obey him. Simple. It's nothing complicated. And then here is the blessings and here are curses that are going to be in the future. All right? And that's the first 5 books of the law, which are also known as, if you remember, can you say it? Torah, all right? And also known as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Pentateuch, 5 books, okay? Pentateuch. All right, so hopefully we've explained a little bit about these books. There's a whole lot more in this, all right? There's a lot. You need to read these books. It's okay if you don't understand what you're looking at. It's okay if you don't understand what you're reading, all right? Just be familiar on it, all right? Study. Go back to Genesis. And understand that this is a lifelong process. Every time you read it, you're going to get something new. Okay? Now, I'd like to close with a little bit of prayer. Bow your heads, please. Thank you, Lord, for giving us the opportunity to hear your word in this wonderful country, that we are still free to have these teachings. And we can open up your word and still read out loud. Help us to soften our hearts to your instructions, to your ways, and to your will, Lord, that you should increase and we should decrease in our lives. Thank you for everything you've given us, and all praise be to your name, Yeshua of Nazareth, Jesus of Nazareth. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Thank you, guys.